If you're feeling restless when it's time to turn down the lights, it might be time to rethink your pre-sleep routine. In this video, I'll share the most important habits to avoid before bedtime so that you drift off to sleep peacefully. I'll show you how some seemingly harmless activities can disrupt your sleep. These small changes can lead to big improvements in your nightly rest. And if you're new here, I'm Dr. Gayla Gorman, a licensed acupuncturist, naturopath, and author of What's Your Kryptonite? On this channel, I'm here to help you reverse the effects of chronic stress so that you can cruise through midlife and beyond symptom-free, so that you can put an end to insomnia and the unwanted results like chronic fatigue, mood swings, and even weight gain. Let's start by talking about some of the habits that we may be just unwittingly conditioned into that are really wreaking havoc with our body's ability to be able to trigger the process for falling asleep naturally. Just know that falling asleep and staying asleep is a natural process. If you think about what it's like when you're a baby, just falls asleep impromptu. We're conditioning our kids to sleep through the night. They don't even get up and use the restroom once they get to the point where they can hold their bladder. That's another misnomer. They're really not holding their bladder. What's actually happening is all these bodily systems are supposed to shut down at night so that we can do rest and repair. When you're little, there's all sorts of growth and development happening too, so you can imagine the amount of energy that takes to be able to handle all of that. But even as we age, rest and repair is equally as important, and our body should shut down all systems that don't need to be managed on an ongoing basis, and we should be able to sleep through the night. We should be able to sleep between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. And that's just honestly when our body is hardwired to sleep based on our circadian rhythms. This typically means that we need to be in bed and asleep shortly after 10 p.m. Then at whatever point in time you wake up after 5 a.m., just go ahead and get up and learn to kind of use that morning time to really get some self-care done that you may not have had the time for if you're going to sleep late, and then you're losing some of the most important sleep hours when that happens. When you wake up, even if you're not waking up till 7, 8, or later in the morning, you still just feel exhausted. And the most important sleep hours are 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. So that tells you that you pretty much need to be sound asleep by 11 p.m., which means you got to get that process started several hours before 10 or 11 o'clock at night. One of the things that really disrupts your body's ability to be able to kickstart this cascade that results in us falling asleep is to eat a heavy meal at any point in time in that 3 to 4 hours before 10 p.m. As you can see, anything eaten after 6 or 7 p.m. is really going to interrupt your body's ability to be able to fall asleep, because essentially your body's still trying to digest a big meal. For those of us who have kind of slow digestion anyway, know that you're going to need to push that back even more. Best thing to do, and I talk about this in other videos, but to just really learn to adopt this, what I refer to as the 18-6 eating plan. Most days you're going to eat 2 satisfying meals, and you want your heaviest, most satisfying meal earlier in the day. Then afternoon or early evening is a lighter meal, and this will really make your sleep so much better. Just make it easy to drift into sound sleep. The other thing that people really minimize the effects of is blue screens. I realize this is a really challenging thing to change, since we've all been conditioned now to consume even our entertainment on screens. These blue screens and the light that emits from them really disrupts our circadian rhythms. A lot of this natural process happens by the light hitting our eyes and all those nerves related to our vision. So if you just find yourself struggling to eliminate the blue screens, then you need to at least adopt using sunset lenses. There's blue blocker glasses that have orange tinted lenses, and these mimic the sunset and really will help to offset some of the effects of the blue screens in the evening in particular. We also want to avoid especially the optional stimulation. One of the things that really is kind of counterintuitive, because sometimes we think of these things as relaxing, is applying heat. You definitely don't want to use the sauna or a heating pad at night. The heating pad does feel relaxing and you may find yourself falling asleep. You'll find maybe that you don't stay asleep, because one of the things that triggers this deep sleep is a cooling process that happens. So it's really important, even if it's a little uncomfortable, even if you feel like you have to kind of bundle up a little bit, you want to get the bedroom nice and cool before you go in to fall asleep, and you can shed layers if you need to as the night goes on. That's typically what I do. The other thing that may really make sleeping kind of difficult is having stimulating conversations. Now, certainly if you're in some sort of power struggle with somebody in your life, having those kinds of conversations in the evening close to bedtime is really not advised. Just know that one of the ways you do intentional dialogue is to be able to say, I realize that this conversation is important, but it's just not something I can do right now. Can we postpone this to tomorrow at an earlier time in the day? You do need to make some sort of appointment to honor the relationship and the conversation that needs to happen, but you don't want to do it when it's going to stir up your mind and then disturb your sleep. And hopefully you're in relationship with someone who respects that, also understands the need for sleep. And honestly, the conversation is going to go so much better when you're both rested. The other thing too that we find is really common to use some form of stimulating entertainment in the evening, exciting, thrilling movie, or, action adventure movie. Those sorts of movies are best consumed earlier in the evening. Personally, I am a sucker for a romantic comedy, and if I'm going to watch something in the evening, it's going to be a romantic comedy, some sort of really light movie that's going to just send me to bed with a light heart and a smile on my face. If you get poo-pooed in your world by those around you because they want to watch some sort of really exciting entertainment in the evening, then you're just going to have to pass, because whether you like it or not, this is stimulating your mind and your nervous system. It's really interesting because I was watching a video yesterday and they were using a device to measure the brain activity and nervous system, heart rate variability between somebody it's the same person, they were watching Netflix versus meditating. And it really just showed that there was no relaxation response happening, even though he thought he was watching this entertainment to relax and wind down. That's just simply not what's happening. And you might think you're the exception and that somehow your brain is wired differently, but just trust me, your brain and your circadian rhythms are not wired differently. You are hardwired, just like every other human on the planet, to sleep naturally between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. If you can't do that for some reason, then you are going to need to find ways to offset that damage that's being created. Some of the ways are included here in these things to avoid. If you find that you have to sleep on a different schedule, then some of these things to avoid before sleep, 3 or 4 hours before sleep, are even more important for you. Getting back to the entertainment for a moment, just imagine that you were walking out of a movie and thinking, like, that was really great, but you notice that you're physically shaking. This is a sign that your nervous system was overstimulated. It happens really regularly for me. I tell the story of seeing Titanic many years ago when it was first out in the movie theaters, and literally I lost a week of sleep after seeing that movie because it was just a beautiful movie, but it was so disturbing for me. If you're already struggling with insomnia, it might be difficult to soothe yourself to sleep with any sort of stimulation like this prior to bedtime in those 3 to 4 hours before you need to fall asleep. This is just an example of one of the countless ways stress creates symptoms and other health issues, especially during midlife. I created a video that shows you how to eliminate these symptoms naturally, so I'll tell you more about that later in this video, but make sure you hit subscribe too, because I share a lot of tips when it comes to dealing with stress that's become toxic, and relieving these nasty symptoms stress creates makes cruising through midlife a breeze. How do we prioritize sleep? Basically, some of these things I'm suggesting, these habits you avoid, maybe you don't have a way to completely avoid them easily. Just know that anything you do to prioritize your sleep is going to help offset the damage that's happening by these things you're doing that basically are sending a pretty clear message that you're not prioritizing your sleep. Healthy sleep is really about quality, quantity, and the restoration that's happening. Quality means we're sleeping really soundly. And if you have tried any of the devices that are monitoring sleep quality, you may already kind of understand how this is happening for you. I don't necessarily recommend the devices. They are disturbing your body's magnetic field, essentially. But if you do have that kind of data, you can see what's going on. And a lot of times we think that we're sleeping pretty soundly. We find that we're really tossing and turning and we're not getting much restorative, high quality sleep. A lot of us too, if we've struggled with insomnia, we may be going to bed early enough and maybe even sleeping, or we're still in bed 7, 8, even 9 o'clock in the morning. You look at it and you say, well, I went to bed at 10 and I didn't get up till 8. That's 10 hours. Surely that's enough quantity of sleep. But the key here, remember I told you 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. That's only 6 hours. You really only need 6 or 7 hours if you're truly sleeping soundly for that entire period of time. But rarely does that happen whenever we've got accumulated toxicity that has built up. My husband is a psychotherapist, and one of the things he discusses with new clients is how they're prioritizing their sleep, because sleep is really critical for emotional regulation. Many of these clients that are really struggling will say, I'll sleep when I'm dead, or something to that effect. He says, well, there's not really a whole lot I can do for you. I can't help you much if you're not willing to prioritize your sleep. They go home and decide they'll at least give it a try. That's what he usually encourages people to do. They'll give it a try and prioritize sleep for a week until they come back for their next appointment. Many times they come back for their next appointment and he asks them how the sleep is going. And they say the sleep is great. They're feeling so much better. They really don't even need to continue with therapy because they're feeling so much better at managing their emotions. And so just know that sleep really is critical. If you've been struggling with sleep disturbance, maybe even diagnosed with insomnia, then some of these things that I'm suggesting here are really critically important that you prioritize. As you start to recognize what does disturb your sleep and maybe some of the habits that you are using that aren't leading to great sleep, and recognize this kind of substandard sleep is not great for you, just know that you can begin to change and reverse the damage by applying some of the things I've suggested here. The first thing you want to do, if you've not been going to sleep regularly by between 10 and 11, just know that you can adjust that even by 15 to 30 minutes. Turn that television off at night. We get kind of sucked into watching one episode after another. The next thing you know, we plan to go to bed on time and it's, 1 a.m. Just know that the TV has to be shut off by 10 p.m. And in those couple of hours before 10 p.m., I encourage you to watch things that are really just light, will lighten your mood and your spirit and put a smile on your face. If your best efforts to live a healthy lifestyle and do all the things you've been led to think are supposed to work aren't getting the job done, you may even be feeling like you take 2 steps forward and 3 back. In my next video, I'd like to show you how to manage the toxic stress that's sabotaging your efforts. You can eliminate the symptoms that seem to be piling up in midlife naturally, without medication, crazy diets, intense exercise, or any other unsustainable lifestyle hack.